Hello and welcome to the Real Women, Real Business podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Lynn Simon, and today I have an extra special guest. If you have ever listened to a podcast, there is a very good chance you have come across the incredible LuAnn Nigara. And let me tell you, I've known LuAnn, oh gosh, I don't even know how many years. I should have fact checked that one before I got on here. But LuAnn, if you're not familiar with her, she is the host of a well-designed business podcast. She's also the host of Window Treatments for Profit podcast. And she has just been an absolute rock star in the business world. She is a keynote speaker, very sought after keynote speaker. She's a seasoned entrepreneur. She operated a family business for, I don't know, decades, basically, a very successful one. And she's a published author. I mean, the list literally goes on. I have had the honor of being a guest on her podcast several times. So naturally, how could I not bring her on to this podcast to bring all of her insights to this audience? So LuAnn, welcome.
Shauna Lynn, I am so happy to be here. This is so fun to have the tables turned, number one. Super fun and super exciting. And it's 7 years that we know each other, my friend. I met you during the first year of podcasting. So I think this fall will probably hit 8 years for our friendship. And what I remember is meeting you that first time, through the podcast, through the interview, and being like, oh, this is a hashtag smart lady. I need to keep her around my world here. So this is a great honor for me to be back here and do this with you now.
Thank you so much. I mean, wow, 7 years is just incredible to even think about. And congratulations on all the success that you've had on your own endeavors. And I mean, did you have any idea when you first started this little old podcast, so to speak, that it was going to turn into, like, you now do live events that are centered around this? You've got these published books centered around this. Like, did you have any idea, like, did you go into it with that plan, or did all these things just kind of start spinning out as you got going?
No, I went into it with the plan.
Okay.
Now, having a plan and seeing it come to life are two different things. So you need to meet a lot of really wonderful people like yourself that bring value and create the content on the podcast that resonates with everybody so that you can do the next steps and live and create the plan and make it reality. But I have told the story a couple of times about, I had a list of 26 different things, and I should pull that list and try and find that notebook with that list. But I remember, when I finally put the business plan together and pitched my husband, Vin, on launching this podcast, I had like 26 different things, that it wasn't just a podcast. And it was, I saw the arc of I saw the arc of 3 books. I have published 3 books, but the first book was what it was. The second book was what it was. The third book ended up being the volume 2 of the second book. And that third idea that I had 9 years ago now for a third book, I still haven't put it into the world. But it was to do the 3 different types of books around the podcast. It was to create live events. It was to create a speaking career out of it. It was to do a lot of things. Now, have a lot of things come from it that weren't on that list. LuAnn University wasn't on that list. I did not imagine that at that time. My chairman of the board coaching wasn't on that list. I did not expect to go into coaching. Those were not things on the list, but it was always a business. It always had a plan for monetization, and it had its different revenue streams that were to be the path to create it as a business. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about this list. So that you said you have 26 things, because I am, in a previous episode, actually spoke about crafting your vision and kind of downloading all those ideas that are in your head onto a piece of paper and then organizing them into different phases. I would love to know, like, how you've got these 26 items on the list. How organized are these items? Are they?
Oh no, it's a list.
It's just a list.
Yeah.
It's just
a list. It's like It's like the first was like when it was said books. Books was a list, and so the first book was, well, you need a book to establish what do you actually know about business? Why you? Why are you somebody that somebody should say, hey, that's somebody with a thought in her head? And so that was the making of a well-designed business, right? And it basically was the story of the creation of WindowWorks. At that point was in business 35 years, and why pulling back, why did I think, looking back, that that was a successful business? Like, what was the things in hindsight that I could pick out that someone could duplicate if they also wanted to have a successful business? And then I knew that I was going to go out and find smart people like you, Shauna Lynn, that had a superpower that had nothing to do with mine. And so I knew that the second book would be a compilation book, that it would be, okay, you have a superpower on staging. Nicole Heimer has a superpower on branding. Nancy Ganskover has a superpower on teaching a designer their value, their worth. And so I didn't know who those people would be, but I had this vision of, let's make a place where there's multiple smart voices, there's multiple superpowers, and each of them contributes to all the challenges that an entrepreneur faces. And let's put that in a book, and let's each of you take a chapter and tell me about, like, Kay Whitaker, content creation and digital marketing. You're my go-to on that. So tell me how to do it. And so, yeah, so it would be like, book establish knowledge and credibility, right? Second book,
Sure.
gather the experts, boom, put it all together. Now put it from different points of view, so it wasn't like, oh, and then this is what it costs to make a book. It wasn't that. It was just, speaking engagements. And then it was live events, small coaching events, large events, so it wasn't LuAnn Live. It was, I want a big event with 300 or 400 people there. Okay. Well, eventually that became LuAnn Live, right?
Right.
So, it's like the framework, right?
So how did it go from the list into something that's actually in action? Like, would you go back to list and say, like, okay, now I'm going to attack this particular item and start listing out the ways to do it? Were you trying to take on multiple items at once? Did you have any sort of framework as far as like, this will be first and then this will be after? Like, how did it go from vision to reality, essentially?
Well, I think what I expected was that the first book had to be out. We had to establish why you, right? And by the way, somebody can read the book and be like, I don't think you. It's like, great, don't think me. I don't care. The people who read it and go, yay, that's all the people I care about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
sure.
I wasn't looking to be a New York Times bestseller. I was looking to share my expertise.
People. Yeah,
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And but the thing was, that was right away, because that was going to be based on my experience that I already had. So I launched the podcast, and within 6 months, I'm looking for that self-publishing company to do this alongside of. I knew that I wasn't going to worry about trying to get an actual published book like with Bantam or something like that.
Sure.
And I also knew I was not going to self-publish that I was going to hire somebody to do the selfing part for me. Okay. Like, I would do the writing,
Smart. Yes.
but you do the rest. Right.
Yes.
And so within 6 months, I'm looking for that person. And what happens is I find that company and I start on that path. And as I turn in all of my content, I'm now podcasting for a year, and I've now had my first year of my experience with you guys. So I go right into the publishing and like, let's roll right into that second book.
Right.
And we just roll right in. That comes out another year later. And then like my first LuAnn Live in 2019 that you were a speaker at.
Yeah.
That happened kind of fly by the seat of the pants, because it was December. And I'm having this conversation that the Power Talk Friday Experts Volume 1 is coming out in the spring, because it's the second book getting ready to come out in spring of 2019. And it's December, and I'm saying, well, we shouldn't just like put a book out. This is like 12 experts that are like really wonderful, super people, and I want to celebrate them. And I'm like, well, we should have an event. And I was like, oh, that should be the live event that we were supposed to have. And so literally in 3 days, I'm like, that's it. The event's in March. And it was, and the thing is, there's things that you do that you should not do this way. You should not.
Do as they say, not as they do.
Yeah. And then there's other things that you're just like, yeah, well, whatever. And like everybody like looks at me, and I don't even have a team at this point. My daughter is working for me only, right?
Yeah.
And like, I'm like, oh, and I remember her like 3 days later, I'm like, so did you call the Short Hills Hilton? Do we have pricing? She's like, wait, this is a thing? We're doing it? And I'm like, yeah, I've already called half the co-authors. They all can put the date aside. Like, let's do this.
And I've done the same thing. There's times where you just start rolling with something like, oh yeah, no, this is gonna be gold. We just need to roll with it. And I'm sure do you have any regrets that you did that? Like,
No,
I know it
no.
was a lot of work, but yeah, I mean, it's I think to your point, that doesn't mean that everyone should just jump on an idea, but one can kind of feed into the next. And to your point, like, you knew you wanted to do live events, you knew you were doing a book, and little did you know that the two were going to collide the way that they did, but wasn't that just so perfect that they did? I know for myself, even, in announcing that I was launching this podcast, I can't tell you the number of people who have reached out to me saying, I've been waiting for you to say you're doing a podcast for so many years, probably since I went on your show for the first time.
Yes.
Even we talked about it then. I've always wanted to do a podcast, and I knew I would someday, but there were certain things in my life, both personally and professionally, that needed to align in order for me to be able to do it, and do it in a way that was authentic to how I wanted to do it. And a big part of that was even just, what do I want my topics to be around? What am I looking to do here? Like, you were very clear when you started your podcast as to the type of audience you were supporting.
Yes.
As am I. And when I explored other areas previously, they didn't quite give me enough of that. Yeah, I really want to sink my teeth into this. I could see from a business standpoint the potential to it and the need for it and the value to it, but it didn't get my heart going the way that
it's got to get you out of bed in the morning.
Yeah. And this
got to get you out of the bed.
This one does. And this all came together for me with the Real Women, Real Business Mastery program that I finally, this is a group coaching program that I was working on for quite some time. Again, conceptually similar to you, I had more of like a list. My list is, are a little bit more structured, of course, but it was a list nonetheless of I know I want to do this group coaching program, and kind of just putting down those thoughts to paper every time an idea comes, oh yeah, I should include this, and oh yeah, we should cover this. And it was about fall of last year where it all kind of came together when I was doing another group coaching. I was like, oh, I know exactly how this is going to look. And I could just get this clear vision.
That's what it is. You can see it. And
see it.
Sometimes, in that moment, it was so clear to me. Oh, event, launch book, get all these authors, get them all together. Let's do this. There's other times that you have this really great idea, but it's not hatched and it's not formed, and it needs to percolate, and you need to be like, okay, sweetie, just let that one sit a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the thing is, I think as an entrepreneur, it's critical that we tap into our intuition and our inside voice, and that we literally honor it. And when you just feel it and it, then just make it happen. Because if you're waiting for permission, you're waiting for it to be perfect, it's never going to feel like everything is right. It's business. It's a risk. That's the whole, part of it.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I tend to work with, and a big part of my audience is what I like to call the accidental CEO. And I talk about embracing this because I don't see this as a negative necessarily, but the accidental CEO is that person who followed a passion, who saw a gap in the marketplace, saw a way that they could provide a solution and help people. And that's what fueled them into it. So they knew they were opening a company. They knew they were opening a business of some sort, but didn't really think about the fact I need to run and operate a legitimate business and everything that comes with that.
Taxes.
So yeah, exactly. So I would say majority of the clients that I tend to work with, the majority of my audience, they didn't create a business plan before they launched their business. Or if they did, it was a piece of paper with 26 items on it, not necessarily a solid action plan.
Right. Now, I also want to just clarify for you. I had a business plan and but when it was what's the future of this? So I had the business plan.
Okay.
For what was this going to be? What was the cost going to be? What was the time and all the things? And, but when you said, did you imagine all these other things that would happen from it? I'm like, kind of.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was and here's the icing on the cake because these other things are possible.
But were there other things in the business plan?
Yeah, so some of them were like the book
Okay.
was like the book. I'm like,
Okay.
it's going to cost dollar bills. Like we gotta gotta plan for this because I'm not going to sit there and figure out how to, upload a
Sure.
cover to Amazon. Like,
Right, right, right. Yeah, of course. Yeah. No,
need people for
there's
this.
there's some, yes, people are needed for sure. So yeah, so you great that you had a business
But I
plan,
come
but
from at that point 35 years in business. And
right.
I also am bringing this to my husband, who is like a lunatic. And he's not going to be like, great idea. Let's just throw the spaghetti at the wall, see if it happens. Like I knew I had to justify it and
Sure.
explain it and figure out what it was going to cost. When did I think it was going to be profitable? How did I think it was going to be profitable? And what were those revenue streams that it was going to that was going to happen. So
Right.
just to clarify on that, the
And no, and
26 was dream list. And
I
if all of that happens, look behind curtain number 2. What else could possibly
right.
happen?
No, and I definitely appreciate that. And I at no point did I mean to imply, of course, that you didn't have a business plan. What I was more getting to is that a lot of people that have started these businesses
Oh,
don't have a business plan
most don't.
necessarily.
Most
So
don't.
they're still kind of figuring out how to like they're operating the business. And I don't know that I think most people don't ever have that clarity of vision that comes from creating that business plan. This is something that I'd have somewhat ventured away from the formal way of doing a business plan,
Mm-hmm.
but it's every aspect of it is
Right.
still incredibly critical. Like you still need to sit down. One of the things I say is, the first thing is just what is your vision? Figuring out where you want to go. Because what ends up happening if you don't have that vision is other people and other factors start dictating the direction your business is going. And you look up a year, 2, 5 years into the business and say, this is not what I set out to do. This is not what I intended to build. So I know you work with a lot of entrepreneurs as well. And mostly in the creative field. I mean, a well-designed business is designers. I'm a creative designer myself. And
Yes.
I mean, the inside of our brains it's spaghetti. Like there's a whole lot of things going on in there. And I say this with so much respect
Of course.
because a lot of people can't do what we do when it comes to
Yes.
creating these interiors and these exteriors and putting this vision together. But the challenge is that we just have all these ideas just kind of bouncing around in our head. So I know that you have such a strong business sense. What do you say to these people that are coming at you and saying, like, I didn't do any of these things. Now what?
Well, first, I just want to say I would have been that same person if I had not started in business with my husband and run the business alongside of him for all those years. He was the structure. And that's why when I decided to speak to the creative home decor industry specifically, I felt like I knew them because I could see the value of what we had created. And I could also see that it specifically happened because he was non negotiable on system and processes. And I had already graduated from, at 35 years in business when I had started the podcast, 25 years past bucking being systemized. Like I spent 10 years going, do we really have to do it that way? Like, can't I just turn it in? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
so kudos to the Vin man. Yes.
yeah. And so I have great compassion, but it's like anybody else that turns a corner, right? It's like, whether it was 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, there were certain systems that I embraced sooner rather than others. There's no question. But I would say full on embracing, operational systems, it was probably 8 to 10 years in every aspect. And the thing is, it's like anybody else that experiences that before and after. I too have that crazy squirrel brain where it's all like, what's happening next? Let's go there. And that's good over there. Let's go here. Right. But once you actually do get into process and system and you do your sales presentation the same way every time so that your installer can rely on that you've said the thing, that you didn't forget it, or that you write your paperwork up the same way every time so the workroom can understand what the heck you want, right? It's like, then all of a sudden, it's like, this is what it feels like to go to work and have it together. It's like I can stop fighting, myself and the systems and like the world. You know what I mean? It's like It's like anything else that you lock it down.
Yeah.
I mean, even I don't care if it's sleep, right? If you don't get good sleep and you're tired every day and everything else, and there's a part of you that knows, well, don't have your phone in your nose until midnight with the blue white lights swirling around in your brain, and then think you're going to just go to sleep. And
Sure.
it's like, you don't want to put the phone down and you buck it for 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. But then as soon as you're just like, that's it, for 2 weeks, I will not look at my phone for 1 hour before I go to bed. And I'm going to do this routine, that routine before bed. And then you do it for 2 weeks and you're like, oh, hallelujah. Everybody should do this. I have to tell everybody about this.
Do other people know about this?
You're like an evangelist, right? So that's when I started the podcast. I was like, you gotta embrace the systems, my friends. You've got to know your numbers. It's so much better on the other side.
And and it's great though that you can admit that that wasn't something that was naturally in you to embrace. And I think even still, and I know you quite well, and I know that as much as you've embraced systems, there are certain things where like, yeah, I'm just not going to do that. Like
No, I hire
yourself.
people to do the things
Right.
that I'm just not going to do. Like, no,
Yeah.
like, no.
And like if
It's
they
like,
try to enforce a certain system on you, like, no, that's just not going to work with my system. So like you've got your way of doing things, and certain things have to adapt to how you do things. And I think that's key, is that I talk a lot about systems and processes, and everyone's always wants, well, what's your process? My process doesn't necessarily matter because it works for me. I can show you my process, not for you to take it and use it verbatim. And don't get me wrong, many people have, and it works for them. But not every personality type is going to be able to adapt it in exactly the way that it is. So figure out what works for you. And the whole thing is too, that my system and my process might not work because there's just certain different guidelines that your company operates under, or our services are slightly different, or how we bill is slightly different, because there are different ways to bill for your design services. As we know, there's so many different ways, and they're not necessarily one more right than another.
no.
There's
too many. I mean, between interior design and home staging, it is really the most wackadoodle businesses on the planet. I mean, I'm just sorry.
No one does things like we do.
It is so complex what you guys do. Literally so complex and so nuanced and so personalized and customized. It's funny because one of my chairman of the board coaching clients just yesterday, she sends me a Voxer message and she's like, I have a particularly difficult client. She goes, I have to give her a proposal. It's a very, it's a big proposal for 15 rooms. She is going to be the kind of client that's going to push me back in multiple areas. I know this. And if my pipeline were full, being honest, I might not even pursue this to the point of proposal. She said, but at this point, if I can rope it in under some boundaries and parameters that make sense for me with your help, I'm willing to give her a proposal. Great. So I said to her, she said, so I put it all together and I said, send it to me like I'm your client, because I'm your garden variety human. I'm not a designer. I'm not a stager. I don't really, I'm going to look at it with clear eyes.
Sure.
And the thing was, Shauna Lynn, I ended up Voxering her back. First, I skimmed it like I do everything. I only half read whatever's in front of me. And then I was like,
was first skimming, yes.
yeah. And then I was like, LuAnn, this is your coaching client. You have to pay attention, like, zero in, girl. A little focus here. Come on. And so now I'm reading every word and I'm going through. And my initial sit back reaction is, this is insane. This is too much information. Like, how can anybody digest this? When I get to the bottom of it, all I see is $35,000. Like,
Sure.
It's so much information. So then I take the next step and I said, well, what could she do to make it more clear? And now I'm looking at it and I'm saying, she's done a really, really good job of making a very complex proposal as clear as you possibly can. And I went, this is the Achilles heel of this insane industry, that you guys have such a big, daunting task to take so many variables in a design project and collate them into something that your average human can digest. And so I said to her, I told her my experience with it. And then I told her my observation of do I think you can actually do a better job? And so there were 3 or 4 places that I thought could be a better job. But the one thing is I wasn't sure by reading it if the client could possibly a la carte. There were 15 rooms on this thing. And I was like, you don't tell me that. And then I was like, is there any incentive for doing all of it or only doing, and can I just do the powder bath for this little amount of money, or do I have to do more? And what was interesting is she ended up leaving me a message and she said, I just didn't know if I could say those types of things on the proposal. I'm like, yes, ma'am, your business, your highway. You can say whatever you want. And so we ended up, taking it to the next steps and really getting a little bit more clarity and coming up with even a nuanced version of it in order to deliver it. But my ultimate thing was, I said to her, I have to tell you, on my podcast, I've interviewed 1,000 people at this point, and I know there is a whole slew of designers and stagers that just send their proposal in an email and expect this human to get it. And I said, but my experience and what I would tell you is, if you send me this 4-page thing with 15 rooms and there's individual numbers, but then the total, I know that I am not going to pick up every nuance. I am not going to understand that in this room it's 2 revisions, in this room it's 1, and 3 revisions means in a living room with 15 items, it's not 3 revisions for every item, but 1 lamp, 1 rug, 1 chair. Not 3 for every chair, 3 for every lamp. And the thing is, you can't put all that information in. It's too much.
It's too,
and I said, these proposals should be delivered in person. And I said, and based on your discovery call and based on your consultation, you should be gathering the information where the person sitting across from you is going to not pick up the detail that is going to be the stick point, because they said, I didn't know that. And then you're going to go, well, it's in my contract. And I'm going to say, bully for you. That's 90 pages. I don't care. I signed the iTunes contract all the time too. I agree to terms.
Oh yeah. I totally read my cell phone contract. Didn't you?
Yeah, right. Oh, how about we buy a house and you sign 40 pages and we read none of them. We sit there at a closing and they're like, sign here, sign. It's a joke, isn't it? It's it's an absolute
it's
joke.
Not optional.
Purchase in your entire life and you read none of it, right?
Right. So, absolutely.
And that's what really gets me is they're on the regular, designers will be like, well, I had it in my contract. I don't know why they didn't know. And I'm like, sweetie, come on. So my thing is you can't really make it much more simple and have it be complete. And I have compassion for that. But you can, in a stand-up meeting with that human, based on your experience and the types of things that they've been telling you that you've been learning about their personality, you can review a contract. Do not read it to me line by line, but pull out the things that you think I might not understand,
those sticking points,
or I might forget, or I mentioned 2 times and you've already told me 3 times, no, that's not included, right? And so it's a difficult industry. It's an uphill battle. It's a lot of detail that designers and stagers have to handle, honestly.
Absolutely. And again, going back to a lot of times we're not starting with a full business plan. Again, I did as well. But by more of the exception than the norm. And this is no disrespect to anyone, but it's just, until you start treating your business as a business, you are going to get a lot of pushback. You are going to undercharge. There's a lot of ways that things can go terribly wrong. And I mean, I will say though, that the power of learning from some of those mistakes is huge. I have made some very expensive mistakes in my time. I don't know about you.
Oh, literally. And what I call them, well, they'll only make that mistake once. Thanks so much, universe. Appreciate that lesson.
Yeah.
The worst is when you find yourself over the years making the same mistake again, and you're just like, sweet Jesus.
I knew I shared
PMO, LuAnn.
And here's the thing though, okay, so relating to designers, as a designer, one of the things that my team and I have gotten really good on is really sticking to the process. And anytime our clients are like, can we just do this? Can we just do this? We always respond with, and this is a gold phrase, in my experience.
That's exactly what I say. In my experience,
if we don't
produce a good outcome.
Exactly. So we need to go in this direction. And there's still the odd time, to your point, there's still the odd time over the years, like not frequently, but where you're like, I know this isn't going to go well, but somehow they've convinced me that this time will be different. And sure enough, all it does is just reinstate, like,
Reinforce.
yeah, reinforce, like, oh no, this boundary, this rule, this guideline, whatever it is, this process we have in place. Yeah, no, this is solid.
We made it for a reason. We
Yeah.
need to be reminded, but
Yeah.
we did make it for a reason, right?
Let's even add 5 more steps to it just to make it a little bit more
Yeah.
clear. Yeah, exactly. No, I love that. And you talk a lot about like the business expertise, and you've got your hashtag smart lady. And I mean, I know this is something you really enforce. You find it's challenging for some people to kind of get that whole, like, what do you mean I need business stuff? Like, I'm really good at what I do. I mean, I don't know, but even when I started my business, I was like, I'm really good at what I do. People are just going to hire me, right?
That's right. The door's going to just come bearing down.
Even with my beautiful business plan, I mean, I tell the story of like my business almost failed in the first 2 years because like the phone just wasn't ringing. With my business plan and everything, I still didn't have clarity on who my clients actually were, how I was going to find them, what mattered to them. I was like, well, what I do provides value, sure, but not if I can't communicate where the value is.
It's so funny because in my first book, the first chapter is establish your mission, vision, and values. And then it goes to who's your ideal client and establish them. And I can't tell you the number of times that people will say to me, oh my goodness, I've been listening to your podcast and it was so hard and in the beginning, but now I've been starting to really do all the different things that you guys talk about on the show and yada, yada. And, at some point they'll say, and I love your book. I read your book. But when I really finally, it took me 4 years to figure out who my ideal client was and what I was really in this business to do. I was like, but you said you read my book. I mean, one designer literally said to me, I said, well, and she goes, and the light bulb went off after 2 years when I really set on my mission and what was I going to do. But in the beginning of the interview, she's like, I love your book. I read it. It's so great. I was like, wait, but you said you read my book. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, that's the first chapter. She's like, oh, but when I was reading it, when I started my business, I skipped over it because I thought I'll come back to that. I want to get to the good stuff. And I'm just like, yeah, that's like, I'm going to make, spaghetti bolognese, but I'll come back and get pasta after I figure out, like, like you got it, like the beginning is the beginning, like,
Yeah, but I think, because I hear similar things. It's work. It's a lot of work. It's not a small amount of work to do it. And what I always tell people when I'm teaching that is, if this seems like an easy task, and if you're breezing through this, you did it wrong. Start over, because it is meant to be hard and you're meant to spend the time on it. And I think here's the challenge too, when you're so excited about you've got this new venture, that you're good at it, that you can do this. You're just so excited to launch. That's all we want to do, is we just want to get out there. Just let me just do the thing that I'm really good at.
Yeah.
And so all of this work slows down that progress. But I can tell you, I mean, I was supposed to launch this podcast a couple months ago. I'm like, nope, can't. I pulled myself back because I knew there was some clarity of things that I needed to figure out still. Mm-hmm. And so, this is something that I think we all want to do the easy stuff, the fun stuff, but business is so much easier and fun if you do the hard stuff.
Yeah. And what it is you're going to have to do it eventually, whether it's 6 months after you start or 6 years or 16 years, because at some point it is critical that you have clarity on what you do, who you do it for, and how you do it if you want to be profitable.
Yeah.
And so what happens is it's funny because another one of my chairman of the boards right now, interestingly, is only in business 8 months. And that is very unusual for someone to make that sort of investment at the beginning. But she's been listening to the podcast for several years. And she said to me, I want to start right. I want to do it right from the beginning. And she just spent literally the last month between our last meeting answering all the questions that I gave her about mission and vision and what are her core values and who is her core client and what is her differentiator. How does she do design different? What is different? Why you? Why am I hiring you? And we had a very good meeting the other day where there were lots of things that she did very, very well in the exercise. and I also don't go through this exercise with many of my chairman of the boards, but this is her thing. She wants to start at the beginning.
Sure.
So we're
Yeah.
starting at the
Let's do
beginning,
it.
right? And I said to her, these three things, what you do, how you do it, and who you do it for. Let's read them out loud. I'm like, could I put any designer's name attached to these three sentences, these three statements? And she just looked at me and she said, yeah. And so then we had a very good conversation about personal differentiators and what does it mean and how does it do? And there was a moment where I could see she felt a little like, oh God, I have a lot of work to go back and do again.
Mhm.
And to your point, Shauna Lynn, I said to her, listen to me, as hard as this seems to do, you are having the opportunity to do it while the train is not barreling down the track at 100 miles an hour. Most design professionals will address this 1, 2, 8, 10 years after they're in business. And then it's so hard to keep the train moving while you're trying to now recalibrate and figure out really what it is you want to do, because you've got payroll, you've got clients, you've got subs, you've got all the things. And you're just like you said, you wake up and you're like, this isn't what I imagined. But the point is, you didn't really imagine it to clarity. You just said, this would be great. But what is this? Your this as a designer is different than someone else's this as a designer. And that's the crux of it. You have to have the clarity on your this, because one designer's this is, I'm going to work every day between 10 and 2 while my kids are in school, period. And now everything we do in our marketing, everything we do in our pipeline building, everything we do in our systems supports the fact that that work can get done between 10 and 2, period.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
a valid this, right?
Yes.
Another valid this is, I want to, if I had a nickel for every time I heard, I want to be the next Martha Stewart, I want to be the next Shay McGee. Like, okay, let's do it. Let's do it. We got this. Let's figure it out. Let's build a big machine. You're going to need leadership training. You're going to need financial training. You're not just going to like make pretty rooms and be Martha Stewart. I got the street.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. And I mean nailing it. Like it's, you want to make sure that you're dreaming up the business that you actually want to be in. But yeah, if you can't really envision what that looks like, I think what a lot of people do is like, well, I see myself in a nicer house and I see myself, with.
And I want you in that nicer house.
Yeah, I want you in that nicer house.
Whatever house you want.
I see myself having this team working with me. Yeah, I want you to have that team too. But what's everybody doing all day? Like,
yeah. And do you know how to manage a team? And do you know how to lead a team? And do you know what the accountability is? And do you know what the seats are for a team?
Right.
I've
got a whole process that I take people through. It's about a 9-step process of hiring. And people are like, oh, I just need to hire a VA or something like that. Or I just need to hire an admin. I just need to hire a marketing person. I just need to hire a social media person. I just need to hire.
Yeah.
And they don't spend the time actually thinking about who they want to hire. So then they hire someone, that person comes on and like, oh, they didn't do anything right. They didn't do anything the way that I wanted them to. Well, first of all, we got to go back to like, are you even hiring for the right role?
Yes.
That's step one.
Yes. And are you evaluating the personality for the role?
Yeah.
We have a whole toolkits, hiring toolkits on my website. It's like, this is the personality profile for a bookkeeper. This is the personality for a senior designer. This is the job description. This is the, the job posting, because the job posting for an admin is completely different than the job posting for a designer, because the job posting for an admin is, we're talking about data. We're talking about number crunching. We're talking about, I love to get into details. And the job posting for a lead designer is, I need space to create. I need, it's right. And the thing is, when we're younger in business or newer in business, we end up, a critical mistake that most people make, and I've observed it time and time again, is they hire someone that they can get along with and that feels comfortable with them. But typically, if you're the owner of your design firm, you've got the squirrely visionary brain. And your right-hand person cannot have a squirrely brain like you. Your right-hand person.
They remind me of me, right? How many times do you hear that?
Exactly.
Remind me.
Oh, we get along great. We could be roommates at High Point. Like, blah, blah, blah. She finishes my sentences. I'm like, sweetie, we don't need two of you. We need one of you. We need one yin and one yang. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we need the other side. But, it takes a while to develop the discipline to understand that we define the seat and the role, and the accountability, and then find the personality that is best, that is going to have the most success in that role. And yes, if we're very clear on our vision and our values, we've established our personal business culture. And so the person who's a completely different personality than us, that is system driven, that is, bookkeeper and Excel spreadsheet queen, can still have the values and the vibe and the culture, but they should feel like a very different person. They shouldn't feel like the girlfriend you want to sit and have wine with. They should feel like, how do you think like that? That's crazy over there.
I mean, obviously you want to make sure there's not going to be friction. You want to ensure that you're going to get along to an extent, but you're not hiring them to be your best friend. You're not hiring them to do wine night with you or to room with you at High Point. You are hiring them to fill a gap. And I mean, I know you know this, LuAnn, better than anyone. Like, hire people who are smarter than you.
Yes.
Like, I know a lot of things.
Self-awareness, right?
Yeah.
What are the things I don't do well?
Yeah.
I did
do a lot of things very well, but you don't
1,000 people things long. Like, everybody on my team will tell you, don't give her that crap because she's bad at that. But I'm like, hey, that's what all your eyeballs are for.
Right. But also, like, you bring up a really good point, though. The fact that your team knows that you're bad at certain things, like, make it known. Don't tell your team that you're good at all the things. Make it known the things that you're not good at, because they're going to figure out ways to fill in those gaps and support you. If you are just pretending like, oh, I can do all these things, it's fine, then they're not going to be able to take that initiative. They're not going to know where they can.
I didn't even know how you could like pull the wool over anybody's eyes. Like, there's no way. Sometimes it's, it took me 10 minutes to get into a Zoom, and I've done it 1,000 times. And I literally boxed you. I'm like, Mary Ali's on vacation today. We're going to have to like power through to get this to work somehow. Normally I'd be like, Mary Ali, I can't get into the Zoom. Please come help.
Oh, it's my favorite thing. Like, I would have, like, back when I was running the staging company still, my favorite thing was when people would contact me about scheduling things. I'm like, listen, I can answer questions about how the process works and yada yada. But as soon as you get to when can you do this, like, that's not me. I got a person who does that. And the best part is that, like, I would actually try. There were times where I'm like, oh yeah, no, I can do this. Find a spot on the schedule. I can book them in or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm going to send this information to my admin. And then it got to the point where I would tell people, like, I'm just going to send the information to my admin, because I'm going to tell you right now, I missed at least 10 different things here. And I don't even know what I've missed, but she does. And there's a reason why I don't do what she does. Like,
exactly.
And it's kind of funny. I think it's especially hard when you start off as a solopreneur and you're doing all the things.
Yep.
So you have no choice initially. That's not entirely true either, but let's just say, you feel like you don't have any choice but to do all the things yourself. And so now all of a sudden you're passing things off to someone else. Like, but it doesn't mean that I can't do it. No. First of all, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Right.
Like, we have a rule for my design business. We operate, the office is actually in my house. And so we don't have regularly scheduled office hours necessarily. But the challenge with this is, if we've got, say, deliveries coming, for example, I technically live in the same building and could accept those deliveries. But I'm like, I'm not going to disrupt my day to worry about accepting delivery. Then I've got to remember to tell you that this has arrived. I'm definitely not opening up boxes and doing proper receiving or marking it off on a spreadsheet that it's arrived or any of that kind of stuff. So can we all just operate as though I don't live at the office?
Yes.
Because at some point I won't live at the office anymore.
Well, and that's just such a great observation on your point.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not the default delivery receiver person just because I live here. Like, that's not a system. That's like, maybe she's there, maybe she's not. I don't know. It's like, no, we do deliveries on Tuesdays and Thursdays when Sally Smith is in the office to accept them.
Exactly. So let's figure out the system, So it's, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And I've even gone back to my team and I've had to say, you know what? You're not even allowed to ask me anymore unless it's absolutely a last resort.
Critical. Because
the problem is, I am still guilty of saying yes to things I shouldn't say yes to, even though I teach people all the time how to say no to things. And I'm really good at saying no, don't get me wrong. But it doesn't mean that I don't still find myself like, I don't know why I agreed to do that. Like, it just seems silly to say no to that. Like, sure, I could do that, but no, I really shouldn't. The one time I was between recording episodes of not this podcast, but another podcast, as well as coaching client calls. And all I had to do was put a box outside the office door for a delivery pickup. But it's raining that day. So now I've got to figure out a way to, like, protect these things. and they were coming at a time that was like 15 minutes after one of my calls, and my call was running late, and like now I'm stressed out, I'm not going to get out there in time. Like it was such a disaster. Like, I understand that it looked like all you said was, Shauna Lynn, can you put these 2 boxes outside at this time?
Right.
And that seems so incredibly simple, and it was a massive disruption to my day.
Yeah.
So just because we can say yes to things doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't. Just because we can do things doesn't necessarily mean that we should. So yeah, if you're not the person who's doing all the things best in your company, then don't do them. And when you pass them off
Right.
fully and completely.
Well, and for me, what I like to do, and I know you do the same, I will work with you to develop the process that I'm passing off to you. You may have to document it for me, but
Yes.
we're going to download it from my brain exactly the way I want to do it. And that's the part, I think, that as entrepreneurs, it's our business, it's our name, it's our reputation, it's our way of doing things. And we don't want to give that up. But the aha is, you don't have to. It's your company. And if you take the time to document that when this happens, then that happens, and that happens, and that happens, then any intelligent human can follow the process behind you. But I think the dilemma comes in when we haven't taken the time to actually observe what process we do want followed in our business. What way do we want a project executed, from the discovery call to the consultation, to the proposal, to the design process, to the, if it's in staging, to the, the delivery of the product, and to the picking up of the product and all of that. It's like, the entrepreneur that's like, oh, I could never trust it would get done as good as the way I wanted to do it. That's because they're bringing some in their business and they're letting them run cowboy and doing it a certain way and catching every 5th thing going, oh, that's not the way I would like it. But thinking that's the only way someone could come into your business, and in skipping the step of getting the clarity on how you run your business and the way you want your business presented to the consumer and to the bigger world. Because, like the podcast, like the production process for me, for a podcast, it's about 9 to 15 hours per episode, and like 6 hands touch it. 6 sets of people. Because I know what I want done, and there's no skipping any of the spots. But here's the part that I do. I do the conversation. I don't do any of the other stuff. But there was a point when I did every single part of it other than the audio editing. I've never done that. That's never going to happen. So kudos to you for learning how to do that. But the point is, I have gone through everything. And when this happens, I want the guest to get this. And when this happens, I want the guest to get that. And when that happens, I want this to happen. And so now I can walk away and I can do an interview, and everybody on my team can execute, because it is my brand. It is my name. It is your design business. It is your name. It is your clients. It's your referrals. It's your future. It's your money. It's your reputation. But you can teach somebody to do it your way. And when you document it, you can hold them accountable for doing it your way.
And one of the things that I love that you said, I mean, there's so many great tidbits in there that I would love to just break down every single one of them. And I will also say, if you haven't listened to episode 2 yet, go back to that. It's called From Founder to CEO, Master Your Vision. And so that will help you to get that clarity on your vision. We give you some steps in there about how to do that. But one of the things that you talked about, LuAnn, was about how you're going to download things from your brain, but someone else is going to document it. And this is the thing. I tell every one of my clients this: do not sit down and say, on Monday morning, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to document all of my processes. That's not how you document a process. And anyone who has ever told you that's how to do it, they lied to you. It was a very mean thing for them to do. The way that you document a process is do the process.
Right.
You can write things down as you go. You can do a recording and share your screen as you go. And don't worry if during the recording, like, oh, whoops, I didn't actually mean to click there. Nope, you actually go over here and said, that's all fine. I do that all the time. I record these little snippet videos. I send them to my admin. Like, here's what I would like you to do. And then can you create the SOP, standard operating procedure? Document it from there. And if there's anything that's unclear, she's able to come back to me. Or if the first time she does it, it's not quite how I wanted it, we can go back to the process and figure out which part of that failed. But you've got to get that clarity on the process in the first place. And I mean, I work with a lot of designers as well. And one of the first things we do, so when I do one-on-one coaching, one of our first sessions, and LuAnn, I know you're going to absolutely hate this, I would never do this, but our first session is a 3-hour session.
Oh no, mine is too. Exactly.
Oh, is it?
3
Okay.
hours. First session, 3 hours. Absolutely.
Right.
That's a
Perfect.
coincidence. Yeah.
Okay, that's funny. Okay, good. So we do a 3-hour session because we need to like dissect all the parts.
Time to get in.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so we're gonna
time.
We go through all their. I'm like, okay, start to finish. You got a new client. They're contacting you. How are they contacting you? And then what's the next step? And what's the next step? And I love how many times my clients will say, well, it depends. Sometimes I do this.
Yes.
Sometimes I do that. And when we first start working together, they don't think there's a straighter line. And don't get me wrong. Again, I operated a design company as well. And it's not as cookie cutter, like coming from the staging world, especially staging is cookie cutter. Every project is going to run the exact same way. Yeah. In design, there's a whole lot of other factors. Every project is unique. It's different. The needs are different. The logistics are different. So yes, every project is different. Does not mean the process is necessarily different. So you really can streamline it. Does it mean that there's some branches that come out at different steps? Absolutely. Yes. But it doesn't necessarily mean that, well, sometimes I do this, sometimes I do that. When we start diving into that, you know why we're sometimes doing things one way and sometimes the other way? Because someone else is steering that ship. Someone else is saying, like, and it's usually the client, but I kind of want to do this way. Or it's that particular contractor that I work with really prefers that I do it this way. Right. But whose business is this?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, one of the things I like to say, I don't know which business guru, came up with it, but the 80-20 rule. Yeah. The things that we do are going to be applicable for 80% of the things. And yes, 20% of the time we got to think out of the box and we're going to go down a different road, but still within our parameters and boundaries. We don't completely go out of process, in my opinion. Ever. I'm like, ever is such a final word, but it's got to be an extremely rare situation. Absolutely. That I'm going to look at somebody and say, yeah, alter your process for that person. No big deal.
Right. And if you need to have a conversation with the client to explain that this is a bit of an exception, like, you know what? Yeah, here's what our process is. We're going to tweak it slightly. That's how I would say it. Like, I'm going to tweak it slightly. We're just going to adjust.
And it has to be justification for it. It has to be justification.
There has to be justification.
Not just because they want it and you don't have the nerve to say no.
Exactly. Like we normally do the contractor site meeting, for example, after concepts are done. But there are times where some of the ideas are so extreme. Yes. We need to bring a contractor in a little bit sooner, just on a consultant basis. And I'm not going to quote together at this time. We're not dealing with scope of work.
Can this wall move? Can this thing happen? Right.
Right. And we pay the contractor for that time. This is another thing that people are like, but my contractor comes in, he does the full quote and and I don't want to bring him in if I'm not quoting because it's a waste of his time. Pay him for his time.
Exactly. He's a professional.
He's a professional. Seriously. So those are some things that, like, yeah, sometimes we're going to move it sooner. We still explain to the client that we're moving this up. We're still going to go through the process. When we get to that point, he's coming back and doing it properly, but we'll bring him in early in order to make sure that these things work. Like I saw it.
I think every responsible business owner knows the difference of there's a valid reason to make an adjustment here versus I'm just getting pushed around and I will not, say anything about it. You know it. You know when you're getting pushed around. You do. You absolutely do. You might not have the courage at the particular moment in time to change it or to stand up to it, but we do know it. And that's where my feeling is borrow the courage. One of the things I've said is pretend that you work for you. Pretend you are your lead project manager and the client wants to do whatever and you have to answer to your boss
because you don't have the authority
for it. It's like if you worked for somebody else and you knew that person was going to have a hairy canary, if you altered the process for somebody, you would figure out a way to explain to that client that we're not changing it.
Absolutely.
Figure it out.
Actually, and I even find as the owner of the company, if you do have any staff working with you, whether they're quote unquote below you on the hierarchy, however you have things, it doesn't mean you don't answer to them still. It is like me telling people, like, I'm not going to book you into a consultation. My admin will kill me if I do, because like she knows I'm going to screw this up. So Like I had delivery that came the other day, was supposed to go somewhere else to another receiver, got rerouted to the office. It was fine. I was advised of it. It was an exception, this does happen sometimes. But the funniest thing was the guy who was doing the delivery was asking questions about where things got screwed up. So I don't know. He's like, who are you then? I'm like, well, I'm the owner of the company. Like, and his contact name is one of my designers. And like, well, no, that's not me. And he's like, and who are you? I'm like, well, I'm the owner of the company. He's like, okay, so he's talking about like the mix-ups that I don't know anything about it.
Right.
And he's just kind of looking at me with this blank stare. He's like, oh no, I have nothing to do with that. You'll have to talk to her about it. I was just told if I could please open the door to this lovely delivery person when he shows up in about 15 minutes. Like, that's the extent of my knowledge of what's going on here. He's like, well, it's 2 mirrors that I'm delivering. I'm like, uh-huh. I'm like, I don't know the project. I don't know the client. I don't know what mirrors they are. I don't know. I don't get that granular. I know all of our projects from a high level, but I don't know them to the granular details like that. I'm like, I have no idea. And he's just looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, no, like you can say as the owner of the company that you don't have all the answers.
Right.
Because you're not expected to. There's a reason why you've hired these other people. So if you are still a solopreneur, you still have accountability though. Maybe it's your accountant that you can't turn into process for, or maybe it's just not fair to any other clients if you change the process. Or maybe you want to just say like, listen, I just know it's not going to work for me. Like it's,
Right.
you get to make those rules.
That's it.
But yeah, imagine you work for someone else. Because I will say that my team does a way better job sometimes of enforcing our policies and processes than I did when
Well,
I
that's
was
because they know they have to answer to you.
Exactly.
They know that there's an expectation, there's accountability, there's a job description, and they have to do it. Or, when you sit down and you do your review, you're going to be like, you never do the thing you're supposed to do.
Right. Well, and the other thing is that I find that they don't get the same emotional hangups that owners do. Owners want to please, right? The CEO wants to please everybody. It's not that they don't want to please everyone, but they're like, no, why should we bend our rules for this? Like,
Right.
oh, no, you're right. So
Yeah.
and you lean into that. Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, this has been amazing. We definitely covered a lot today. So let's talk a little bit though. You've got your Power Talk Friday events coming up. Tell us a little bit about what they are, where they are, how they're happening, how people can learn more about those.
So Power Talk Friday. So my Friday episodes are called Power Talk Friday, and they feature the experts and the consultants from the industry. So typically Tuesdays, we're doing interviews with designers and their experiences and how they run their business and what they've been, successful at and so forth and what they've been challenged by. But Friday, that's how I met you, is I bring the outside experts in that coach and teach and inspire and educate people in how to run their business better. So the Power Talk Friday tour is, we go around the country. We put together a one-day coaching event. We start at 8:30 in the morning. It is a go big and go home day. Okay. So we start at 8:30 in the morning. We have a hot breakfast together. By 9:15, it's like chop, chop, let's go. And I usually invite anywhere from 4 to 6 experts to be with me on a particular tour. So for example, you're going to be with us for our Las Vegas Power Talk Friday on August 2nd, I think it is, right? 2024. And so we'll be in Las Vegas, and you will be there. Amber de la Garza will be there. I'm trying to think off the top of my head who else the other experts are that are going to be there, right? But what we'll do is, the thing about a Power Talk Friday tour is not everybody can be an expert for me. I mean, I'm just going to be serious. Like, I have to know you. I have to know that you are a solid business person and that you have solid information, because this event is such a small event. We do a maximum of 25 attendees, whether it's designers, stagers, or window treatment professionals, but often we'll have 8 people attendees there. So we sometimes have 8 experts and 8 attendees. And the thing is, throughout the day, I will look over and see you, Shauna Lynn, in deep conversation with someone. And at the end of the day, when we talk about our business, our baby, our reputation, I can't be looking across the room and going, oh my God, what is she telling her? Is she giving advice? And so it's a highly curated list of experts that I know as humans and as business professionals. And you each typically will have a lane that is a superpower, but you all always have a broad experience in business. So somebody might ask you specifically about staging or process, but they could also talk to you about client retention or,
Right.
messaging, right? Because you are a broad experience expert. And so this is what we do. So all morning, we have roundtable discussions. And when I say roundtable, I should say group discussion. So you and I will be talking for 25 or 30 minutes, 40 minutes with the group. It's almost like a podcast interview with everybody there. So
Right.
you and I are going to talk about an area of expertise. And the thing is, we do this a questionnaire. And so the questionnaire, when you sign up, you get a questionnaire and it's like, how many years in business? What's your gross revenue? What's the size of your team? Like, I want to get a context of who you are and what are the struggles that you're experiencing right now. And so what happens is we pull this together and we look at it. And then I look at my experts. And so you have multiple disciplines that I know I could tap into you for, but I will look at here's like 5 out of 7 people have process problems. I'm like, okay,
Right.
Shauna Lynn, we're going to talk about what is your process? How do you document it? What are we going to do? Right. And so this is how it works. And then we have lunch, hot lunch. And then in the afternoon, it's literally, if there's 8 experts and 8 attendees, it is a rotation of 20 to 30 minutes, one person with one expert, like in the weeds. How do I do this in my business? This is what they said this morning. This is what the conversation was, but how do I translate it to my business? And sometimes it's a 3-to-1 ratio, but it's never more than 3-to-1 ratio in that. And we run around all afternoon. We set a timer and you get 30 minutes. It's like speed dating with experts. And the thing is, it is a transformational day because there is so much opportunity for in-depth conversation about your particular business. And the thing is, I can recall the very first Power Talk Friday I did was in 2017. It happened to be in Las Vegas. We had 6 attendees there. And first of all, what happens is mostly when you come to Power Talk Friday, then we become friends, because we're spending 15 hours together.
Yeah.
It is, right? And so one of the designers there at the time she came was a $2 million design firm. She actually came and also brought her junior designer with her and paid her ticket as well.
Awesome.
And I said to her at one point, why did, because once I understood her structure, she had senior designer, she had project managers. I'm like, why did you choose to bring your junior? And she said, LuAnn, there's something in this kid. This kid is going to be a good one. And I want to teach her from the beginning. And I wanted her experience in this. And I want to pour into her. And I want her to know that I want her to be here. Right. But the thing was, Lori was this business owner, and we're still friends 100 years later. And then another woman was in the group with us, and we were meeting in July, and she was opening her business in September. So in one day, in one room, I've got a seasoned professional with 15 employees, and I've got somebody that is going to open their business in 3 months. And the value is there because it's not a group dynamic. There's conversation in the morning that's group, but now the experienced is learning from the inexperienced, the inexperienced is learning from the experienced. But there's so much time for personalization. And then we break around 5:30. I personally go back to my hotel wherever we're staying. I get a shower. I get changed because I'm throwing all that off of my brain. And then we come back and we have cocktails and we have a celebration dinner and we have aha moments, and the sponsors join us for dinner. And it is just this way to take the day. And honestly, what it is it's a way to take the day and collate your experience, kind of download it and absorb it and have a moment to feel the gratitude for it, because we really do make great connections and we do have these amazing ahas. And what's so crazy is Vinny and I learn something in every Power Talk Friday. He's in business 50 years.
Yeah.
40, right? And it's just a very special thing. So we're doing it. Dallas is probably over by the time this airs. We did Dallas on April 5th, 2024. We're doing New Jersey, June 7th, 2024. We're doing August 2nd in Las Vegas, 2024. And then we're doing October 25th in High Point, 2024. That's the schedule for this year. So, and you can go to powertalkfriday.com to learn more. And it's different experts. It's different experts each thing. I've had people in certain years come to 2 and 3 Power Talk Fridays in a year because the combination of experts is different for each event. And so
Oh,
you get different knowledge and different questions and challenges, answered. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, well, and I love that you were saying how it's so customized as well. So it's not as though you're not promoting saying, come to this Power Talk Friday and you're going to learn X, Y, and Z.
Oh, we're not opening up a workbook,
Right. It's
okay, everybody page one.
Yeah, you tell us what you want to learn, and we're going to make sure that our experts are prepared to take on these challenges with you.
Exactly.
And in a very supportive environment. I mean, definitely sounds more of an experience, more workshop style than what you're going to get if you just attend a conference. And don't get me wrong, there's tons of value in conferences as well. I go to tons of them. I find them
soak it in.
Exactly. Absolutely enjoy it. But there's, you want to have that balance of things. And this sounds to me like one-on-one coaching just on fire, basically.
Yeah. You know what it is? What's interesting about it is it's kind of the best of both worlds, right? You get that one-on-one-ish experience, but you also get the benefit of, like, if you're in business 4 years and somebody next to you is 20, the thing that they raise their hand and they say, Lou, how do I do this? You're like, oh, that's a future problem I'm going to have.
Right.
How do I take that answer and apply it in my business at my size now so that maybe I mitigate that problem and I don't have that problem? The other thing that's really special about it is I cannot tell you the number of times people have met their business bestie at a Power Talk Friday. And that years later, I run into them at High Point and they're like, we're still besties. We got up at High Point together. We got to Vegas market together. We're roommates. And I'm just like, oh my God, it's so cool.
It's so amazing. Yeah. And I mean, to your point with the group stuff, you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what questions to even ask. So to be able to have other people there that are asking questions that you didn't even know you had. Yeah. You're like, oh yeah, either that's a future problem or that's something that I should be thinking about now and didn't even know I should be thinking about. So, I mean, having that experience, having that exposure is just, there's no real dollar value to put onto that. It's just such an invaluable thing. Well, this has been wonderful. Okay, so if people want to find you, so yes, Power Talk Friday, go to powertalkfriday.com. If they want to find you and learn more about you, where do they go?
That would be LuAnnNigara.com. The website has the podcast there, the books there, LuAnn University there, Power Talk Friday there, has all the things. So LuAnn
has a lot of great resources on there as well.
The hiring toolkits are there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, definitely worthwhile checking it out. I'll be sure to put in the show notes as well. LuAnn, thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this. This has been absolutely incredible. I so appreciate all the insights that you've shared. I'm sure that the audience does as well. So listen, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, this is really resonating with me, I really appreciate you tuning in. I hope you'll tune in again next week. Allow me to continue to bring these types of guests to your journey. And of course, don't forget to leave us a review, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast. And if you think this could benefit someone else that you know as well, please share it with them. Don't keep this a secret. Definitely share us with others. And until next time, everyone, keep thriving. Thank you, LuAnn.
Thank you so much, Shauna Lynn.
Bye.